she recognized that this art thing wasn't a thing. It's who I am. And she supported that on a variety of levels. And she just said, just promise me whatever you do, you'll be the best. This is Adrienne Jones coming to you live from New York, and you're listening to Artistry.
Welcome to another episode of Artistry, where art meets industry. We are your hosts, Rachelle Etienne-Robinson and Stan Substantial Robinson. All right, welcome to another episode of Artistry. Today's guest is a professor from Pratt Institute. She is a curator, founder, and chief creative officer of Black Dress, and, of course, honorary auntie, Miss Adrienne Jones. Welcome to the show, Adrienne.
Peace, Adrienne.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, born and bred, New Rochelle, New York.
Yes.
How was life growing up in New Rochelle?
My parents are very interesting people. So, yes, I grew up in the suburbs. New Rochelle, at that time, it was mostly white and Italian and Black. And I did not recognize how protective my parents were of me when it came to racism until I grew up. So I did not grow up knowing that people did not like you or could not respect you just based on the color of your skin. So hearing that later on growing up just sounded crazy to me. It's like, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. And I grew up in a household where my parents had friends from everywhere around the world. And so we never had, it was never said like, oh, this is my white friend, this is my German friend, this is my Black friend. They were just friends. Right. And even at a time growing up, my parents were very close to interracial couples. We didn't have a name for it then. It was just, that's how it was. That's who they married. And these people were family. So it was very interesting to find out years later the history behind New Rochelle and going to school there, because New Rochelle was actually the first city in the Northeast that was forced into busing. Due to segregation. It had become the law, and we were the first test city. Mm-hmm. And so prior to me starting school, there were two schools. One was Lincoln School, which was about 2 blocks away from where I lived, going south. And then maybe 3 blocks north, there was another school. And I was very sickly as a child. But by the time it was time for me to go to elementary school, they had shut down Lincoln School and we were bused. And my mother fought really hard to get me to be able to go to school near home. So if I had an asthma attack, she would be able to get to me. And because this was now law, federal law, she could not do that. But my mother stayed vigilant. And I remember her taking me to school and putting my hand into the hand of my first teacher. And she said to her, Adrienne is left-handed, and I expect her to come home the same way.
Wow.
And not knowing that just wasn't about me being left-handed. That was about me being one of maybe 3 Black children in the whole class. Mm-hmm. And I'm sending her to you as, she knows who she is. She needs to be able to come home the same way. Right. And
accept her as she is, basically.
As she is, Mm-hmm. And I have to say that going to a school where I think all of my teachers elementary school, all of my teachers were white. And I got to tell you, I think I was treated more than fairly. And I think that had a lot to do with my mother's presence. But again, being a sickly child, I missed a lot of school. And my teachers not only came to our house, to our neighborhood, and brought me the work that I missed, but they actually came in and sat with me to make sure I understood everything that they had sent home to me. Wow. So for me, it was uneventful. I didn't know about all the politics that was going on as far as me going to school. And then coming into school the first day, and this little girl walks up to me and she says, "You want to be my best friend?" And I was like, "Sure." And her name was Frances Figari, very much Italian. And when I got to middle school and it was time to choose a language, I chose Italian because her nonna did not speak English. And I needed to know how to communicate with her.
Wow. You know, you bring up such a great, interesting time in history, in that so much so, you were featured in a documentary that I believe came out called "Leveling Lincoln."
It's not out yet. Yeah.
Okay. By director Arden Lewis. Can you tell us about the significance of, you know, it being uneventful? Because for a lot of folks, when we hear about this time of desegregation and busing, you know, you hear horror stories. And so...
and it was very eventful, right?
Right.
I can only give much applause and respect to my parents. My parents were older than my friends' parents, somewhere between 10 and 20 years older. So they had experienced and witnessed another part of American history that was even more horrific. And my dad, both my parents came out of the South, and my dad he served in World War II. And when he came back, he never went back to the South. He stayed, and there was land left to him by his mom. And he and his sister decided together that they were never going back there to live. They always went back to visit, but never going back to live. And they sold it.
Wow.
So I think their level of protecting me from any form of racism was also based on the hope that by the time I became an adult, I wouldn't have to deal with that.
Right.
So I think just the fact that they were open to raising me different. And I know most parents, their dream is to give their children a better life than what they had. And I can definitely tell you that my parents did that. My mother had a high school education. My father, who I will fight anybody to tell you that he's the most brilliant man I've ever known. And he only had a third grade education.
Wow.
But he was smart in the way that he was able to maneuver himself through Jim Crow, through the civil rights movement, and still be here. And my father was no joke. You know, he had, I know I have his temperament. I can go from 0 to 5,000 in 3.2 seconds. And I remember asking him one time, you know, knowing this about him, how did you not end up on the lynching end of a rope? And he said, because my mother prayed for me. And then he said, because I got the hell out of the South, you know. And he wasn't, he never showed, neither one of my parents ever showed a bitter side of what they went through. These were the stories that they told us. So we were well aware of our history. Whereas his sister, when I tried to talk to and interview her about it, she just looked at me and she said, leave the past in the past. And it was the way she said it that you knew she was not going to talk to you about it.
Wow.
So that's the only thing I can say with during that time period with everybody going through, you know, the terror, because that's what it was, that my parents put a covering over me that sustained me throughout till I went off to college.
So as you moved through your education, you had an interest in painting and photography and fashion. What was the first introduction into the arts for you?
Well, if you talk to my mother, she'll tell you I more than likely painted my way out of the womb. Yes. I don't recall not creating. I remember going back to elementary school, I was the one who did the backdrops for all the plays. Wow. So whatever you showed me, I could paint it, I could draw it. And my mother saved, I was in the 5th grade and they had an art exhibit. And I can't tell you where this idea came from, but I painted this black man with a big afro, and he had on a orange and green striped shirt. Yes, I've always been into bright and bold colors. And I won first prize. You know, so that's always something that I've done. I am my parents' different child, and they embraced it and allowed me to embrace it. So, and in doing that, the finger wasn't pointed at me just being Black. It was pointed at, you know, my education. It was pointed at, this is what you're interested in, so we'll support that. And even with me being sickly as a child, I don't, you know, most people who know me don't know how bad I suffered with it. And it wasn't a big deal. I'm telling you about it now because I have to fit it in somewhere in the story, but it wasn't a big deal. They didn't make it a big deal, so I didn't make it a big deal. And I think it was the same about racism. They didn't make it a big deal in my life, and constantly told me I could grow up to be whatever I wanted to be. My mom was hoping for a doctor. That kind of fell through when she found out that I couldn't stand to see the skin pierced. Like to this day, I would keel right over. Blood doesn't bother me, but I can't watch a movie where somebody's taking a needle. And then she just, she recognized that this art thing wasn't a thing. It's who I am. And she supported that on a variety of levels. And she just said, just promise me whatever you do, you'll be the best.
I think you just inspired a quote. I don't know if it already exists, so I'm gonna do some research after.
Okay.
But if it doesn't, when you said art isn't a thing, I thought you were gonna say art isn't a thing, it's everything. And I was just like, man, if she finishes like that, boy. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you the assist real quick. Okay. And we're gonna make that into a shirt. You know what I mean? We're claiming that right now. We'll go ahead and work out the percentage
right now. So let me say it again. Right. Art isn't a thing. It's everything.
It is everything.
Bars. There we go. I just had to get that in bars.
And so Upon graduating high school, you went on to FIT, for those that do not know, Fashion Institute of Technology. And this is during a time where the city, the country was very lively. You're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. What was that experience like?
Interesting thing was I had a lot of different interests. And by the time I got to high school, and not tooting my own horn, I'm just telling you as it is, I'm really smart. I'm one of those kids.
Claim it.
And so, that standardized testing, and I always scored very high. Testing has never been a big deal for me. And so when I got to high school, in fact, before I got to high school, all of the art classes that I just loved and enjoyed, they kind of steered me out of those because I was this enigma. I'm this Black child, this sickly Black child who excels in school. And so they put me in a lot of what they call now AP courses, college prep courses. Mm-hmm. So by the time I got to high school, I really did not have any art. And one thing I know for sure is your gift is there inside of you and it will wait for you. Mm-hmm. And when it comes back larger than life because it's just sitting there marinating and waiting for you. And that's what happened. So I had, my English teacher, she wanted me to go to Brown University to be an English major. So I applied to Brown University. I was very, very interested in psychology. It kind of tickled my fancy to figure out, well, how does the mind work and what happens when it stops working? So I was going to apply to a few different schools for psychology. And I had so many different interests. My guidance counselor said to me, she says, well, Adrienne, what do you love to do? And my mother the only way I could describe this woman is as a character. And I have to laugh at that because I'm sure many people describe me the same way right now. She had an atelier in Harlem. And my mother was her muse, and she made some of the most stunning clothes ever. And she was originally from New Orleans, a very, very dark Creole. So her English was always interjected with French. Mm-hmm. And she's one of the people who had like a huge influence on me. And she died tragically. I didn't find out till years later that she had an issue with heroin and she committed suicide.
Wow.
But she left me one of her sewing machines. I didn't know squat about sewing. And I also love to tinker. So I put a sheet out on the floor and took the entire sewing machine apart and put it back together. And that's essentially how I learned to sew.
Wow.
So my last 2 years in high school, I'm making all these clothes that nobody else is wearing, and just having fun, And so my guidance counselor at the time, she says, well, Adrienne, what do you love to do? And I said, sew and dance. And you could always find me at somebody's party, standing on top of a chair or a table, dancing. I may come back to that later. Okay. So I always wondered if I had said dance first, if that's what she would have chosen for me. And when I said so, she said, that's it, you're going to FIT. I didn't know what FIT was. I thought she was sending me to a school for physical education. When I say in the dark, I was completely in the dark. And so off I went. I had made this gown for my mother. And at the time, they were only accepting 25 students per major. Mm-hmm. And I went in and I got in. Some very wonderful people in my life. I've always had a Jewish parent or two or four. And at the time, my Jewish family was the Blumbergs. And Mr. Blumberg owned a business in the Fashion District. And he called some people and I got a full scholarship.
Oh, wow.
And so I, if we bring it forward, there's a little conflict, because I've had some amazing people in my life who just happen to be white. So that's how I ended up at FIT.
How does the social issues, these issues that affect our community, how does it inform your art? And then of course we know that you're also a professor at Pratt Institute. So how does it inform your art? And how does it inform the art of teaching? How does because I know you teach something very specific, but still, how do you keep these things in mind while you create and educate?
So what has brought us to the space and time that we're in right now has happened, countless times.
Sure.
We had President Cuomo. That's right. He gave a fantastic speech, actually right around the corner from me at Iona College. And, he took it back to Rodney King. And it just keeps spinning and it keeps spinning and it keeps happening. And again, these are all things that my parents saw growing up and living in America. So my story at Pratt brings that into it. And it's very interesting with the way my parents protected me from racism. And I kind of just walked into it.
Right.
It's like, okay, they did their job. And guess what? You still gonna have to deal with this. And so to come to Pratt as I was, when I started at Pratt, I was the only Black professor there.
In the entire school?
In my department.
Oh,
I'm in the
department.
fashion department.
Gotcha.
And it was 10 years before they hired another Black professor. That's not to say they didn't hire other people. It was 10 years before they hired another Black professor in the fashion department. And again, I'm smart. There's no shame in that. And I kept getting passed over. Now, I can't even say I got passed over for promotions. They didn't even give me the information about promotions.
Right.
And I was very blessed to always have people looking out for me and having amazing mentors. And so one of my mentors at Pratt was the assistant to the chair. Her name was Setsu, a Japanese woman who had been in the Japanese camps here in America. So she had a history and she knew, what it was like to be singled out because of who you are and where you come from. And so she said to me one day, well, how come you're not applying for any promotions? Now, I don't come from a teaching background. I came straight out of the fashion industry. And another one of my mentors, who I call my fairy godmother, she was teaching at Pratt at the time, Barbara Livesey. And there was an opening. And she told the head of the department that she thought I would be great for it. Barbara Livesey is a white woman. So it was assumed that the person that she was recommending was also white. And so when I called, they gave me the job over the phone.
Wow.
They're like, wow, we've heard so many amazing things about you. If you want the job, it's yours. Can you schedule a day to come in and just sign the paperwork? So I was like, sure, of course, no problem. I'll be there on such and such a day. And I come in and I had on some denim overalls and a t-shirt. And I come in and I go into the office, and the chairperson looked up at me with, a little funky attitude. And she says, registration is not until next week. And I smiled graciously and I said, oh, no. I'm not a student. I said, hi. And I held up my hand and I said, I'm Adrienne Jones. And we've all been there, so we all know what the look looks like when they look up at you and, oh, shit, she's Black. Her face dropped. And she gathered herself together, and the best thing that she could come up with was, oh, you sound different over the phone.
Wow.
And that was my introduction as to what it was going to be like teaching at the Pratt campus.
Wow.
So we'll just glide through, because this interview is only an hour, and we'll just glide through the ugliness, but there was ugliness. But not only did my parents raise me and let me know who I am, and allowed me to be an artist, and allowed me to hear my voice. They raised a warrior. And I didn't have a problem with fighting all these white people who thought because I was Black, I didn't belong there. I was like, well, you know what? Sign me up for the same program you have.
Right.
And they didn't. So I was like, okay, well, that's not a problem, because I got my own pen and my own paper, and I'm not going anywhere. So that fight, which went on for probably about 10 years, maybe a little longer, because it was a fight in sections. It didn't all happen at one time. But when the fight was over, I won. And that put me as the first Black woman to get a full-time tenured position at a school that sits in the heart of Brooklyn to this day. Yeah.
Wow.
And the fight, like you said, it was in stages, and you continued to bring awareness and support. Among your many roles at Pratt is advisor to the Fashion Society, which is a student-run fashion club. Was no longer. But you also, in 2014, you conceived and co-curated a landmark exhibition called Black Dress, which honored Black designers and addresses the lack of diversity in the fashion industry. And this was in 2014. So walk us through that process.
Again, it was one of those situations where you kind of told me that I couldn't, and I was like, watch me now. One of the other professors, white, had given a lecture that we had all been invited to. And she was giving a brief history on design. And she made this comment that went straight through me. And she says, well, the only thing that Blacks have demonstrated in the fashion industry, or have given to the fashion industry, was hip hop. And when my head finished spinning around, and I straightened it back on, and it was probably still on backwards, but I can talk to you from the back of my head. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh yes, that was the main contribution that Blacks had, hip hop clothing and all like that. I was like, I'll be damned. So heading back to FIT, my godmother was this incredible woman who had started the Soul Club at FIT, Clara Branch. And she started that after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And by this time, she had long since retired. And there were many people at FIT who tried to pick up where she left off. And it was a huge undertaking. So nobody really was able to carry it off the way she did. And part of her research and part of her history, she had collected all these files on Black designers. And she had all these books, and I always remembered that she had them. And they were just collections of newspaper articles and anything she could get her hands on pertaining to Blacks in fashion. And before she passed, I was able to get hold of this huge amount of information. And that was what inspired me, picking up where she had left off. The dream isn't over yet to do a larger exhibit, but I still had to fight. Even though it was groundbreaking and we brought in higher numbers than any exhibit that's ever been held at Pratt.
And was well covered by the press as well.
Well covered. They didn't like that it was done by a Black woman, you know? So we did it. We did it very well. And thank you, Rochelle, for, I will never forget that night. You were in New York, and it was the night before the opening. And, you came over. We had the exhibit at Pratt Manhattan on 14th Street, and you came over and you said, "I'm sorry, I can't be here tomorrow," because you were leaving. And you said, "But you got me, and anything that you need." And I am so grateful to you, because Black dress would not be where it is today. And we're still a little undercover, but we got some big things getting ready to pop up. And but without you pushing me to say, let's keep this going, this is important, I know for a fact I would have just gone on to something else. I would have dropped it and left it there. So I am so grateful. And for those of you who don't know the relationship between Rochelle and I, Rochelle was one of my students.
I was going to get there.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I wanted to be able to say that.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks, Teach.
And I'm just, to this day, I'm very grateful for the love and respect that I've gotten from my students over the years. Rochelle, I sent you something last night. I was so tired when I finally went to bed, I could barely read it. And I thought somebody had sent me a post. And this is what I thought it said, because, when you get tired, you can't see straight. And I thought they were saying, follow this person if you want to know about Blacks in fashion and the industry and all like that. And I was like, well, who else is doing that? And come to find out, it was a former student talking about us in Black dress. And I was like, oh, so nice, So it's great. And I've been getting all these letters of love and, thank you. And it's really good to know that what you're doing, even though it may seem very small, that it has helped and influenced a lot of people. Yeah. Because essentially that's what we're here for. We're here to turn back and reach back and bring somebody else forward. We're here to give the history. And as Black people, we're here to leave a legacy. And that's what we have to do, not just for our immediate families, but for our community family, because there's still a lot of people out there hurting. They don't know how incredible we are.
Yeah.
They don't know the foundation of who we are. And, thank God for artists, because we have, people like Stan, the musicians, who talk about who we are and where we came from. We've got the artist Ava DuVernay, who says, let's take our history and, not everybody reads books for whatever reason. So let's put it up on the big screen so you can see where we've been and what we do and how to celebrate. My friend Chan, he's an incredible documentarian. So we've got all these people doing all these great things, and we all need to know about that, because that's what's going to bring our community back together, so we can now fight this current war that we're in, this attack on Black bodies.
Absolutely. And that's why, one of the many reasons that we wanted to do this, but in particular, wanting to invite you, as a former student, I'll never forget from the moment I walked in that first day, those many years ago, and the fact that, I still came back, throughout my entire schooling from kindergarten through college, I can literally count on one hand how many Black teachers I've had. And all of them I remember to this day and have always been very much, very impactful on my life. And so when I met you, it wasn't just fashion. And I think that's the allure. That's why people gravitate towards you. Yes, fashion. And, just for those who don't know, Professor Jones teaches drape and construction, methods in fashion and construction, leather and fur design and construction. And so when you're in these classes, on the surface, that's what you're learning. But when you leave out of there, you're gaining knowledge, you're getting mentorship, you're getting care, you're getting experience, you're gaining support. And so it's so meaningful. And I think that's why those students gravitate towards you, because you genuinely care about their well-being and want them to succeed, particularly the students of color, because we already know you have so many things stacked up against you. And so you want to see them thrive. And so thank you, Professor Jones, for all that you do and for all that you continue to do. And so for us just to reach out to help out, whatever you need, of course, we're dropping everything. We got you because you had us. And so I want to thank you for that.
The quote I always thinking about, that I always think about when I think about teachers is like, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
And so, like the students kind of reaching back out to you and showing support to you throughout your career is just a testament to what type of individual you are and how great you are at what you do. So definitely we celebrate you.
And it took them a while. It took them long enough. But Pratt finally recognized your innovation and actually awarded you the honor of being a Distinguished Teacher Award for the 2017-18 school year. So, better late than never. But I just want to acknowledge that was received. And, to standing applause, you did a phenomenal job when you gave your acceptance speech.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, it's been an honor to have been in the lives of so many people. And, when I'm up there doing my thing, because like you said, Shell, it's not just the teaching. I give you news, weather, and sports. We got to put a little comedy in there and, what's going on in the world and what's happening. And then we get down to business. Right. And it has been such an honor to meet so many amazing people who are doing so much, and to be a part of their journey, right. To be even remembered that I was a part of the journey, because we come across a lot of people and not all of them make that mark. So for me, that's an honor. I think about this book I was given years ago, The 5 People That You Meet on the Way to Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I know who my 5 are. At least I think I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an honor and a blessing to know that somebody might put me in their 5.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. I want to transition just a little bit to speak to your education. So after getting your associate's degree, you went on to get your bachelor's in arts education from the College of New Rochelle, and also your master's in art therapy. How do you foresee, because of the pandemic, because of the protests, the mass protests that are happening from, nationwide, from East Coast to the West Coast, North and South, globally, folks are finally, for those of us who have been in the fight, who've seen it, this has been a long time coming, but, finally, I guess people are on board. How do you foresee going back into the classroom if you're putting on your art therapy hat?
Oh, I don't even know. Like, day to day, that's all that I will allow myself to do. I have practiced yoga, so I know about, trying to stay in the present. And it's hard when there's so much coming at us at one time. So when we got the word that, classes were going to be suspended, at the time they said suspended. It was just before spring break. And so we were like, okay, so we're going to be gone for 2 weeks and then we'll come back and, we'll get it all together. And that didn't happen. We didn't come back, and not knowing when we came back. And my first concern was not even how am I going to teach what I do, because I teach studio classes. I teach, my average class is 6 hours.
Right.
But it wasn't that. It was how do I look after them? How do I know that they're okay? Mm-hmm. So, we were essentially given that 2 weeks to figure it out. I want to say within 3 days, I was emailing everybody in my class to find out how they were, where they were. A third of all of my students come from China. And, not everybody was able to get a flight out. I mean, it was hard. So at that point we had like 6-7 weeks left because we were at midterm. And I want to say out of that time, at least half of it was just checking in with their mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
And there were days where we just, it's like, okay, we're not doing that today. We're going to talk about you and how you are. And as a student who, chose to stay locally, you don't always realize that sometimes people choose to go away to school, not just because this is a great school and it's going to give me what I need, but also to get away from whatever's going on at home.
Absolutely.
Everybody isn't blessed to have a great home life and come from a great family.
Right.
And, and I'm aware of that. I have that kind of relationship with my students that, we can talk about it. So that's been a big concern. And now the returning, we don't know what that looks like.
Right.
So all I can do is, in our last class, I said, listen, this is our last class, but I'm not going anywhere. If you need me, reach out. I'm right here for you. And I've had students that do that have done that. So I don't know what that looks like. A lot of people are talking about taking a year off.
Wow.
Then we have to add to it this whole racial divide. And again, Pratt is in the middle of Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
there's a precinct, I think it's the 88th precinct, which is right across the street.
Yep.
And, protesters burst into there. And if you're a parent and you're concerned about your child's health and well-being, maybe New York isn't the place, but this is happening everywhere. So it's not like, oh, well, go to school close to home. Well, there's still COVID wherever your close to home is.
Yep.
Right.
And there's still a racial divide wherever your close to home is.
Right.
So, we have to start dealing with this shit. We can't keep sweeping all the ugliness back into that closet, because what has happened now is, just like anytime you don't clean out your closet, you don't get rid of stuff, you just keep throwing it in there and slamming that door closed. Well, guess what, America? You put too much shit in the closet and now the door has burst open and everything is falling out right on top of you.
Right.
Well, we're about to close out, but I did want to mention, for those of you that would like to learn more about Adrienne and about Black Dress, the Black Dress Project is in a form of a website, blackdressexhibit.com, where you can learn more of not only about Black fashion designers, but also those in the fashion industry. So whether it's models, stylists, hair and makeup, beauty, they're listed on there as well. It's a great resource. We also have Black Dress TV, which is available on YouTube as well as the website, where video interviews of prominent Black and African-American figures speak and talk about their stories. Adrienne, what's next for you?
Oh, girl, we doing big things. Let's see. We're working on the book.
Yes, indeed.
Working on that book. There's a documentary that I'm in, another documentary called Dark Girls, done by my friend D. Chanson Berry. And that's actually due to be out on the OWN network at the end of this month. I don't have the exact date, but when we have it, we will post it on Black Dress.
Right. And this is the second installment of Dark Girls.
The second installment of Dark Girls, yes. Kind of excited about that. Black Dress, we've been working closely with the African American Museum. Again, the virus got in the way, so we were supposed to do a speaking engagement on fashion there in March. So, we'll revisit all of this. This just gives us more time to work on our masterpieces.
Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Professor Jones, for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Artistry, where art meets industry. This podcast has been brought to you by Substantial Art and Music. For more information, please visit www.subartmusic.com. You can also follow us on social media at subartmusic. We'll see you soon, but talk to you sooner. Peace.